This is lesson 15-6 on partitioning shapes. You should have already watched the visual learning video in Pearson Realize before doing this assignment with me together. Let's go ahead and begin. The first one says, use one type of pattern block to cover the shape and draw lines to show how you place the pattern blocks. How many equal squares does the shape have now? And what do you notice about the equal shares? I know you don't have pattern blocks with you, and I don't have any with me either, so I drew lines to partition this shape. You can go ahead and draw the lines, make 2 rows, so only draw one line to make 2 rows, and then make 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, which means you draw 3 lines going up and down to make 4 columns, and try to make it as equal as you can. Pause the video if you need to, and then push play when you're ready. All right, now that you have yours partitioned like mine, let's see, how many shares do we have in this shape? I can see that there's 4 plus 4, or 4 times 2, which equals 8 shares. Now we need to write down, what do we notice about the equal shares? What can you tell me about each of these shares? What do you notice about them? First of all, they are all the same size and shape. Okay, to partition shapes, you need to make sure that they are all the same size and shape in order to be equal. It's very important that you remember this, because if it is not the same size or shape, then you did not make equal shares. Okay, back side. Here is an example of dividing it into 2 equal squares. When you divide it into 2 shares, then they are called halves. Now on a circle, you can go straight up and down, or you can go side to side. We could have gone diagonal, but you have to go through the middle point. Here, they did not go through the middle point. They did a diagonal, but it's not through the middle, and so it didn't work. So this share is smaller than this share. So you cannot call this halves because they are not equal. They always have to be equal. So here on this one, when you divide it into 3 equal shares, then it is called thirds. And they did it making 2 lines up and down, which makes 3 equal columns. On this example, you can see that the lines are not spaced out properly, so that way this middle square right here is much larger than the 2 on the side, and so they are not equal. So please, when you're dividing your shapes, try to do it as best as you can so that they look equal. On 4 equal squares, it's called fourths. So 2 is called halves, 3 is called thirds, 4 is called fourths. And if you wanted to keep going, 5 is called fifths, 6 is called sixths, 7 is called sevenths, 8 is called eighths, 9 is called ninths, and 10 is called tenths. So most of them you just add that TH in the end of the word, okay, except for third and halves. Okay, let's see. On this one, it is a circle. So for circles, you have to go up and down right in the middle, side to side right in the middle to make the equal shares. If you notice this one here, of course, these are not equal. You could tell this piece is much larger than the other 3 pieces. Now on a square, you have lots of options. If it is a square, not a rectangle, it has to be a square. Then you can go like a plus. You can go diagonal on a square, and it will make 4 equal. And you can go up and down, making columns, or side to side, making rows. Okay. Divide this rectangle into 3 equal shares. How many thirds is 1 square? How many thirds is the whole rectangle? So we have a couple choices on how to divide this into 3 equal shares. You can do rows side to side, or we could do columns up and down for the number 3. So I think it's easier to make columns up and down, because sometimes when you do rows and it's skinny like that, it can be a little harder, but you can go ahead and try it. Let's do the up and down. So I'm going to eyeball it and try to make it, there we go, try to make it as close as you can as to equal. I can see this one's a little bit bigger, so I might even erase that and move my line over just a tiny bit to try to make it more equal. Now I'm trying the best as I can to make thirds, 3 equal shares. Okay, so how many thirds is 1 share? Excuse me. So one of these shares, just one piece, you would say it is 1/3. Okay, how many thirds is the whole rectangle? So how many of these third pieces do I have to fill up the whole thing? Well, we have 1, 2, 3. We have 3 thirds would fill up the whole rectangle. Okay, describe each equal share. Write a half of, a third of, or a fourth of. So they did rows, and they do look equal. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 equal shares. So we are going to write a fourth of. And we're talking about one piece, one section is called a fourth of. If you were talking about all the sections, then you would say you have 4/4. All right, on this circle, good. They did not try to do lines side to side or lines up and down, because we know that won't make equal shares. Instead, they made their peace sign for thirds. We have 1, 2, 3 sections. So one piece is called a third of. If we wanted to talk about the whole entire thing, we would say 3/3 or a whole. And now on this square, I see that there are 2 equal pieces. So just one piece that we're talking about is a half of. If we wanted to talk about both pieces, we would say that it was 2 halves or a whole. Okay, divide each square into halves that show 4 different ways, and they did this for us, so we just need to trace. You can see that you can divide it diagonally, up and down, diagonal the other direction, or side to side. 4 different ways to make halves. Okay, next page. We're going to divide each shape into the number of equal shares given and show 2 ways and then complete the sentences. So we need 3 equal shares. We have to come up with 2 different ways to make 3 equal shares. So we know we can do rows, and then we can also do columns. So let's start with columns. And we're just gonna do the best we can to try to make straight lines and equal. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, I have 3 equal shares. Now next one I'm gonna do rows. Remember, since I'm trying to make 3 equal squares, I'm only going to draw 2 lines. So now let's draw 2 lines side to side. Try to make them equal as best as you can. And now I have 1, 2, 3 equal shares. So each share is blank the whole. What should I write right here? You should write is a third of. Talking about just one piece is a third of. Now each whole is, I'm talking about all three pieces. What would we say for each whole? Each whole is 3/3. Okay, number 4, we need to make 4 equal shares. So we can do it same thing, rows and columns, or we could also do a plus shape. And that will make 4 equal shares. Okay, and then I'll do as best as I can columns on that one. That's not quite equal, especially because that line is crooked, but I'm just do the best that you can to try to make 4 equal shares. Okay, each share is blank the whole. What goes in that blank? A fourth of. On the next one, each whole, if I'm talking about all 4 pieces, what do we say? That's another name for the whole. All 4 pieces, 4/4. Okay, now moving on to the circle, 2 equal shares. If I go like this, is that 2 equal shares? No, I have to make sure I'm going down the center to make those 2 equal shares. So we can go side to side, or we can go up and down. Try as best as you can going down that center. Okay, and now I said you could go diagonal, so if I went this way, that's fine too, as long as you're going in the center. Okay, each share is blank the whole. What should we put in that blank? A half of. Each whole, now I'm talking about both of the parts. What should go in the blank? 2 halves. And halves, the plural of half, since it ends in that F, we have to change the F to a V before we add ES. Okay, we need to look at a pattern. What comes next? I see 2 columns, an X. 3 rows, 2 columns, an X. 3 rows. What comes next? 2 columns. All right, and then on the back, Leon cut a waffle into halves. Draw lines to show 3 different ways he could have cut the waffle. So we need halves, which means 2 equal pieces. Give me one way I could cut it. Right, I can cut it in the middle, going side to side, or up and down, or diagonal. Now it doesn't matter which way your diagonal is. It can go from the left to the right, or it can go from the top right corner to the bottom left corner. Either way would give you a half. And Tina is planting a garden. She wants to have equal parts for beans, for tomatoes, and for peppers. Draw a picture of how she could divide her garden. Okay, normally gardens are rectangles, so I'm going to go ahead and draw a rectangle shape. And how many different vegetables is she planting in her garden? Okay, I see that she's planting beans, tomatoes, and peppers. That is 3 different types of vegetables. So if they each need to be in there equally, I need to divide it into 3 equal pieces. I have a choice. I could either do columns, and each section would be one of her plants, or she could plant it as rows, which means I have to draw 2 lines to make the 3 equal shares. Okay? Draw lines on the picture to solve the problem. 4 friends want to share a watermelon. How could they cut the watermelon so each friend gets an equal share? Now be careful, this is a circle shape. So, can we make rows to make 4 equal shares? Would that be equal for each friend? No, this would not be equal for each friend. Whoever's getting this piece is much smaller than whoever's getting that middle piece. So on circle shapes, you cannot do rows and columns always to make those equal shapes. We have to do circles a little differently. So if there's 4 pieces, the best way to make 4 equal shares is to cut in half side to side, and then in half up and down, and now we have our 4 equal shares. Each friend will get, what is the name of just one piece? What is that called? A fourth of. We can just say you could say a fourth of the whole or just a fourth. So I'll just leave it as a fourth. Okay, and now Matt wants a flag that shows fourths. Which flags can Matt use? Choose all that apply. So here I have a rectangle, and it is cut into equal shapes, and they are all now these triangles are slightly different than these triangles. Now they do say on the rectangles that even though it's a slightly different shape, it ends up being the exact same amount. So we can select that first one as being equal amounts. Okay, what about the second rectangle? Is this show equal force? Yes, it does. And what about the third one? Does this show equal force? Yes, it does. And the last one, does that show equal force? No, it does not. Okay, you can go ahead and do your homework now and then send me a picture.